G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. If you were a rabid, crazy animal rights activist and vegan protester, how would you know where to find the feedlot? If that's what's on your mind, then according to Barnaby Joyce, the fact that you're an animal rights activist means that you're a vegan, and that means that you're a left-wing socialist greenie who's out to destroy the fabric of Australian society, you see? And apparently 3 years ago, some wicked, evil, horrible person, they went and had a look at publicly available information like what's in the telephone book. What a radical left-wing institution that is. Disclosing, as it does, that Ranges Valley Cattle Station, that wrongly spelt GLENN when it should only have one N, Innes, is at 1304 Ranges Valley Road. Gives you their phone number, their fax, phone number of their CEO, phone number of the feedlot manager. And for those of you with Gestapo tendencies, the Celtic Informer, it features nature activities map for Greenies to go to national parks and go bird watching, looking at things. And it says that if you go out of Glen Innes and you go to Dundee, which would be that little village down there in the valley, then by golly, by gosh, by jingo, by Jove, this here map in this here phone book, which will directly be declared illegal, it actually shows you where Ranges Valley Road is. It shows you where Ranges Valley is. Look at that. Well, Barnaby Joyce and the National Party and the National Farmers Federation, they ain't going to be having none of that. They're completely unsatisfied with the existing trespass laws, which would lay me open to a criminal charge if I was to go over there, past the road reserve, across the fence, in a private land. It's already illegal to enter enclosed lands without permission. But is that enough for Barnaby and his hysterical mates in the Farmers Federation and the National Party? No, it's not. Why is it not? It's not because we're in the grip of a drought, the Barnaby Joyce fish-killing drought. And behold, 3 weeks ago, all of a sudden somebody decided that as a result of the fish-kill drought that wiped out the fish at Menindee, the National Party and the Farmers Federation would have an hysterical crying fit because somebody 3 years ago made a website that tells you where farms are farms, where feedlots are feedlots, where abattoirs are abattoirs. And as a result of that brouhaha, the agitprop, all up and down the east coast of Australia, the right-wing National Party politicians started to say that, oh, look, animal rights activists and vegans are lunatic, extremists, terrorists, and they got to be stopped because they're fucking greenies. They're greenies, don't you know? And I don't know about you, but I sort of got the feeling that because global warming is becoming a big issue, therefore perhaps the right-wing Farmers Federation, the ecological vandals from the National Party, they might be sort of trying to associate vegan extremism with any kind of green belief system. It was just sort of like a vague, speculative feeling that I had. Maybe something was going on. I didn't quite know what it might be. Golly, golly, gosh, look at that. The Roads and Maritime Authority of New South Wales. They're going to be considered guilty of publishing the location of where to turn off on a Ranges Valley Road, because Barnaby Joyce and his mates can't bear the thought that Australian citizens might know where they're going. I'm actually on my way to the dump, but I'm in good time. So just to give Barnaby Joyce the shits, and to show what a wanker he is, and how facile and shallow his agit propaganda is, let's us go for a bit of a drive and see what there is to see at Ranges Valley Road, where the feedlot, according to the map, is supposed to be. Countryside's looking pretty good considering the green drought we're in. Why anybody would think that any greenie in their right mind would expect to have any sort of an impact on the business decisions of a farmer by coming out into this sort of country and locking themselves onto a gate and making boo-hoo sob noises is kind of it's beyond my comprehension. But mind you, I'm 58. I was a Greenie back in the days when Greenies were lawfully allowed to say go and protest at a logging operation, lock onto the bulldozers with a chain or sit in the middle of the road or do something. The contractors would then call the police and the Greenies would then say, well, we've actually got a legal team at work and they've filed an application for an urgent interim injunction in the Land and Environment Court to stop work for this, that or the other reason because you're threatening endangered habitat or whatever the reason was. And that used to work pretty well in the 1970s and the 1980s. And in the 1990s, the various business interests, particularly in the logging industry, they said, we want resource certainty. And the Greenies said, well, we want certainty for wildlife and habitat preservation. And they set up what they called the RAC Act, the Resource Advisory Committee on something, I don't know, assessment committee, allocation committee. And they went around and the idea was they were going to find enough trees to keep the sawmills going for 10 years without harming the wildlife. And that process took about 5 years, and at the end of the 5 years, the New South Wales government said, oh, by the way, we need 20 years worth of resource security for the sawmillers so the Greenies can go to buggery, and by that stage they had the numbers in Parliament, and that's what happened. And then they changed the law so that it is illegal for any third party to even file an application for an injunction in the Land and Environment Court. You've got to actually be the landholder or the contractor or perhaps the National Parks and Wildlife Service, and the state government prohibits entry into the logging coops in the state forests. The private landowners, they prohibit entry. So your actual grassroots Greenie activist who wants to go and find a toilet for a quoll and lock up a 25-hectare logging coop, they have great difficulty getting in there lawfully. So mostly it doesn't happen anymore. If you lock onto a bulldozer in a logging coop and delay the operation by 5 days, you will not only get charged for trespass, you'll get hit with a bill for losses to the industry or the contractor. So that doesn't happen either. So it's been 20 years since I photographed my son sitting in a tripod at a logging protest. That stuff doesn't happen anymore. Grain truck feeding the cows at Ranges Valley. Little bit of the bad erosion from the 200 years of normal farming. So yeah, last week when all of a sudden probably 150 Greenies all up and down New South Wales and Victoria and some in Queensland spontaneously staged simultaneous protests where some of them blockaded a road in Melbourne, some of them showed up at an abattoir, locked onto equipment, some of them went to a dairy farmer and told the cow herders that they should be growing vegetables. At Gympie there was a goat dairy where someone's been ringing them up a couple of times a day or a couple of times a week for months, telling them go and get a job where you don't annoy the poor little pet goats. And miraculously the local police rang up the goat dairy and said, oh, you got to get all your goats out of the dairy because today's the day the wicked evil vegans and the animal rights activists are going to protest up and down the country. You got to save your goats. So the idiot who ran the goat dairy did what the police suggested, moved his goats, and no protesters showed up. No protesters showed up. But the police were sure they was going to. Why would that be? One asks oneself. What could possibly generate such a spontaneous wave of activity among animal rights protesters and vegans who apparently live in the city because they don't stumble that you can't be a vegetable farmer on dry land where you're running dairy cows with fodder that's grown somewhere else. Here we are, Yarraford Road, Nant Park Road. We're still on Ranges Valley Road. That's Ranges Valley Cattle Station and feedlot. We're driving up the middle of it. What are you going to do about it, Barnaby? That's the old orchard. There we see the old Ranges Valley Station house. Quite a big spread. This bridge down here is new because the old one forced the trucks to slow down. And over there in the extremeness of the distance, you can see the industrial silo and feed mixing setup. Old-fashioned outbuildings, fancy stone mailbox, old workers' quarters, new workers' quarters, and great big fancy palatial gates. They're not ashamed of being a feedlot. They're quite happy for everybody to know that this is Ranges Valley Feedlot. There's a lock on the gate. Ranges Valley Cattle Station Proprietary Limited, 1996 Lot Feeder of the Year, 1997 Lot Feeder of the Year. No unauthorised entry, visitors by appointment only. Trucks must not use this entrance. And that's the view you get from the road. But on the other hand, I have different fingers. Let's go and have a different attempt at a different approach and look from a different perspective. We're going to go up Nant Park Road. Which stretches out into the distance through several causeways. Past a paddock of corn, past a paddock waiting to grow, past some actual bulrushes. I think they were anyway. And this is the vantage point from which to view Ranges Valley Feedlot. But we don't want to look at it like this, or even like that. We want to look at it through this and see what we can see. Now that's at 10 powers magnification, and that is at 50 powers magnification. I'm pretty sure that's just black soil that's having the cow shit dug into it, but pretty soon we'll get to see some cows. Now here's the thing, I know from deep experience, having been a Greenie years and years ago, back when you were allowed to make protests, if you went to a town that had a university, if 12 or 15 people showed up for a meeting that had been called in response to some environmental issue and notices had been put up in public places around the town, prominent spots, if 12 or 15 people were there, one was probably working for ASIO and getting paid to tell them what had happened at the meeting, and another one was probably what they call an agent provocateur, thinking up radical things for the group to do, because the whole idea, when there were no communists around after the fall of the Berlin Wall, was to try and get the Greenies to do something that you could lock them up for. Now what I think happened was that because the National Party and the National Farmers Federation were deeply on the nose in the bush as a result of the drought, making all farms unprofitable, I think therefore, thus and because, what they've done is they've gone along and they've activated all the ASIO agents provocateur in all the little green groups, or the extreme vegan groups, and the idea is to associate vegan extremism and animal rights extremism, which will irritate the shit out of middle class Australia, particularly rural middle class Australia, and get everybody who was thinking about voting Labor or Green or for some independent party, as a result, of Liberal national mismanagement of the environment, and get them all to fall in line behind the Liberal National Party, because all Greens are extremist assholes, just like the animal rights activists and the vegans who slowed down city traffic and locked themselves up to a machine in an abattoir. I think the whole thing was horseshit, a staged event put on by the Liberal National Government and their security surveillance services in a desperate attempt to rescue the National Party vote. So fuck you, ASIO. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.